The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
Welcome to another Leon Charney report. Today we're going to talk about a very, very important subject. It's called security, homeland security. And we have three experts here. They come from where else but Israel. Who else is an expert on security but Israel? If you watch television after September 11th, you saw everybody from El Al, from the bellhop to I don't know what, telling you how to secure airplanes. Except for the fact that El Al has 24 planes and the American fleet probably has 5,000, so it's not that simple. And then you have Israelis who really are equipped to know, because unfortunately they fight terrorism every day, to tell the United States or people in the United States how they might benefit by that expertise. And we have with us three prominent gentlemen. One is Assaf Heffetz, who used to be the chief of police of the entire country of Israel, not just the northern and southern commander, but the chief. And we have David Rubin, who used to be the economic minister from Israel to the United States, who knows how to secure economic plans too. And Dov Shiloah, who was a man of, well, he worked in high intelligence units for the Israeli government, and whose father is very, very famous. He was one of the heads of the Mossad, which is the Israeli CIA. First head of the CIA, appointed by a man called David Ben-Gurion. Alon Ben-Gurion was on this show a couple of weeks ago and talking about, we had some great discussions about his grandfather. And your father became the head of the Mossad because pre-Mossad, wasn't he involved in doing stuff pre-Israel? Wasn't he involved in intelligence matters? And
he started intelligence matters, I think, in the 30s.
I read his history.
In the 32, he went off on a secret mission to Iraq.
Right.
And then a second mission to Iraq. And he was involved together with, I think he was recruited into everything by a man called Dov Hoz. And I'm named after Dov Hoz.
Really?
Dov Hoz, a famous person, unknown, of course, but so many people are not remembered. And then he was, let's say, doing things from within the system and was appointed by Ben-Gurion to construct or build the Mossad, and was the first head of the Mossad.
I read his history. I believe he worked very hard. Did he die young?
He died at the age of 49 in 1959.
Remember the history. So I read the history of your father. Today the Mossad looks a little different.
Well, you know, sizes, numbers, missions,
no computers.
challenge.
Your father was there.
No computers. A film was made about him a few years ago, and sort of to express or to explain what happened was, my mother said, who's still alive, just turned 90, she said, had he known that a film would be made about him, he would be turning in his grave.
David, you're the founder of a thing called TICS. What is TICS?
Well, like you said, there are many Israelis coming here to the States and trying to tell the Americans what to do, whether it's in airlines or whether how to secure airports and nuclear reactors and such things. And I thought maybe a bit presumptuous to do that. So we came up with another idea.
You have to be correct.
You think so?
Yes.
Okay.
For change.
But I think the United States probably, if it doesn't know now, it won't take long, but the United States will find out what to do about the terrorism. However, there's one thing that Israel does have, which the United States does not have, and that's the experience of, and I'm talking about really about the, basically about the homeland, of living with terror for over 35 years. And we've developed in Israel many systems, many regulations, many habits. And some of them may be applicable to the United States, some of them may not be applicable to the United States. We don't claim that we know what's good for the United States. But we think it would be very helpful, and it would shorten the learning curve of the Americans if they just hear about what we do in Israel in various ways concerning the terror. Now, people can say we like it, we don't like it, we like part of it. They can apply some parts of it. And I think just transferring the educational part and giving the information, I think will benefit the Americans.
All right, Assaf, you're really the man who was on the ground. You commanded the troops. Yeah. You had the police under you. And Israel and Jerusalem today is it's a terrible target for terrorism, correct?
Yes, it's correct, but it's a long time ago. It started with Jerusalem. It's a very sensitive area, and many times the terrorists put Jerusalem as a target for their operations.
How do you protect that?
It's very difficult to defend and to protect Jerusalem itself, because it's very complicated area that involve Arabs, Israeli Arabs, but the Arabs, and circle around Jerusalem, it's also Arabs, Arab inside, outside. It's very, very difficult, almost impossible to protect it. But you need to use intelligence, electronics means, and technological means, and a lot of forces to protect and to have security in this very sensitive area.
The first time I think I heard your name was when I was sitting with a man called Ezer Weitzman, who was the defense minister of Israel, and there was a bus that was attacked by a bunch of Arabs, and at the same time Gail Rubin was from Connecticut. She was killed, and you were then in charge of I guess an anti-terrorist group. Yeah. Am I correct?
Yeah, I was the commander of the anti-terrorist unit, and I called to the scene, and they rushed from Netanya to the area.
It was right on the Haifa Road.
Yeah.
Right.
And when I came to the scene, to the country club intersection, what I saw that the bus is in the flaming, in very strong fire. The ammunition exploded and many casualties all around.
But that was not suicidal terrorism, was it? Mm-hmm. They were not suicidal, the terrorists.
No, it's not suicidal.
That was not suicidal terrorism. That's a new phenomenon now, suicidal terrorism, especially now with a woman. Now, have you seen Arik Sharon or the government of Israel's plan now to sort of make, let's call it a new Mandelbaum Gate around Jerusalem? Have you seen that? Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I know, and I know this
plan.
This plan, and
is it workable?
It will be better, but it's not to solve all the problem, and not can block the city from other terrorist operation, terrorist incident. But it will improve the situation.
When you were chief of police, the top sheriff in town, did you have a group that studied suicide bombers, or you didn't have that phenomena yet?
No, yes, the phenomena it comes from 1996 and before.
So you had people studying all the time?
No, we had this phenomena in my time, many times, really? On the buses. And the 5 line in Dizengoff Center, in Dizengoff Street, right. In Jerusalem many times. We confront this problem very, very hard.
I'm going to go around the panel now. I'm going to ask you the same question. What was your immediate reaction on September 11th when you saw 2 civilian planes knock down the World Trade Center? Your gut reaction, what did you think?
I shocked. I never think that something like this can happen. We are talking about the possibilities that plane will crash in a city or something like this, but I never believed that something like this could happen.
David?
I was watching it on television. I started watching just...
Are you an American also, by the way?
I was born in New York, but I'm an Israeli.
You sure you don't want to take advantage of the tax treaties?
No, it's okay. I manage with one country tax, that's enough.
All right. We would help you out otherwise.
Okay, oh, thank you. But basically, I was shocked, and you know, I was just sitting opposite the television. Started watching just right after the second plane hit. My son, who was at the time in New York, he called me and he said, "Open the television quickly." And I was just saying, I don't believe it, I don't believe it. Now, as Assaf was saying, in Israel, I happened to do some of my reserve duty in the Israeli Air Force. And one of the things, when I did my reserve duty, I realized that the Israeli Air Force, and for many, many, many years, since the 1970s, there's been this standing procedures against terrorists hijacking a civilian plane and trying to crash it over. Everyone's talking over the Ministry of Defense in Tel Aviv. That was supposed to be the target that they would try and crash it. And they have standing orders what to do in such cases. And I was looking at it as, you know, those guys, I mean, that's not serious. I mean, no one is ever going to do something like that. I never treated this really seriously. Obviously, they knew what they were doing. And when I saw this happening, I said, I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
Dov?
Well, what can I say? I mean, to add to what they said, I was in total shock. I saw it.
Where were you, in Israel?
I was in Israel. I think it was my wife who sort of screamed down the hall. I looked at it. We saw the second plane come in. It was on CNN or something. I couldn't believe it. I was sort of, listen, I've been exposed to things. I knew about things. I was involved in all sorts of activities. But this was way far and beyond of anything that I could have imagined or thought about. I always felt for a good number of years, that there wasn't enough, let's say, international cooperation between intelligence organizations. But nowhere in our thoughts did we imagine this kind of an event taking place. We remember scares, if you remember the events, all of a sudden gas or chemicals in Japan that took place in the station. There were all sorts of things which were bad, things which were, you know, difficult, but nothing of this magnitude, nothing really.
You might know, how good is the intelligence sharing with the Mossad and the American intelligence? Do you know? Do they share a lot of information?
Well, as far as I know, and I'm no longer in public service, in civil service, I think there's a great intimacy in the relationship, and there's a lot of exchanges. There are common interests, and there is a lot of sharing. I think, but this is natural for every intelligence organization, it's very difficult for them to share intelligence because you collect intelligence, to pass it on, you feel you might be compromising your sources or something like that. So it's difficult, but I think in recent years there has been an upsurge of sharing of information. Most or the most effective kind of sharing is always on a bilateral basis, not a multilateral basis. And I think there is a high degree of understanding. And sometimes you find that, I'm not speaking specifically about the United States and Israel, you find that the relationship or the sharing of information between intelligence is at times much more intimate and very close, far beyond sometimes the political or the diplomatic relations between the two relevant countries.
Did your father, by the way, ever meet Angleton? Who was that famous?
Jim Angleton.
Jim Angleton.
Well, I can say as a child I once saw him at home. I have some photos of visits of Jim Angleton at home.
You have to explain who he is. He was very...
Jim Angleton was the head of the counter espionage division within the CIA, and he was looking for moles, for Soviet moles. Now, when the relations started with the Israeli intelligence community, it wasn't clear who should be responsible for these relations. They couldn't put it into the Near East department because that would mean, you know, mingling with the Arab countries. So then they would decided it was delicate. So maybe the best thing would be the counter-espionage. Added to that was that Israel, I think, was seen as a possible source for information about Russia, the Soviet Union. So this again came under the realm of Jim Angleton, and Jim Angleton became a very close friend of Israel. to the extent that in his memory there is a fund and at the Center for the Memory of within the intelligence community, and he has a number of friends who still remembered the old Jim Angleton.
Yeah, he played a very prominent role in the initial development of the State of Israel, especially in intelligence, and he's credited like with being the Mr. Israel in a sense in the CIA, and a lot of people probably haven't heard of him. Assaf, who takes care of the terrorism right now in Israel? Is it the police? Is it a combination of the border police and the Israeli, some of the Israeli divisions or brigades or whatever they are? Who's really in, let's take Jerusalem. Who's in charge of the defense of Jerusalem?
Look, to fight against terrorism, first of all, you have to hit the infrastructure of the terror. And the first of all, the mission of the Shabak, of the
Secret Service,
Secret Service,
internal secret
the
service.
army,
right?
the Mossad also. All the security forces deal with this problem. The police in charge to react and sometimes to try to prevent. But the main mission of the police is to react in any terrorist activity, to contain the incident and to save lives, and to enable to the ambulance and all the security, all the emergency forces to get into the scene and to treat the casualties and evacuate it in a speed, in speed time to the hospitals. This is the main mission of the police, and they are doing very good. And in the last few cases, the police officers in Jerusalem, in Afula, in Hadera, are commit their mission, their task, in the best manner, the best way.
Is it tough to get police, to get them to join the police? Is it tough to get recruits? Is it hard to get people to join the police, or you have enough people?
No, we have enough. If we have more budget to the police, we can recruit more. And I think in Israel they need to add a budget to the police to recruit more and more police officers.
All right, Dov, we talk about integration of various intelligence agencies in the United States. Do you think Israel has a very good integration between its intelligence units and its police, etc.? You think they work together? You know, the Israeli army, by the way, has one chief of staff, and then you have a chief of the Air Force, a chief of the Navy, and a chief, unlike the United States Army. And the chief of staff is the chief of staff of everything. And so you've integrated that in the army, but the question is there confrontation between the various agencies in Israel also?
Well, first of all, it's a bit of a loaded question, but I would say, like we say, the minute two Jews meet, we have three opinions. But that's joking. I think the issues are quite serious, and I think that although a lot of the cooperation and integration depends on the personalities of those involved, heading and leading these organizations, basically there is a high degree of coordination. That doesn't mean there aren't arguments or conflicts, but there is a sense of purpose, a sense of unity, and in this sense one doesn't compromise the missions or the objectives by letting, let's say, personal conflicts come in the way. I think we have learned through the years to really work together. I think it was always a question of trial and error and division of labor and areas of responsibility, but basically things are going well. I think the coordination between the police and the security service and military intelligence and the Mossad really do function. That doesn't mean there aren't problems, but basically I think, and you know, at times of crisis we always say that we have a united front. We unify our strengths, and this is a constant battle, and this constant battle forces us to really work together.
We're going to cut for a break. We'll come right back and we'll talk to our panel of experts on security, and we'll ask them, let's assume that I was the mayor of a small town, what would this unit do for me and how would they help me to protect my community. We'll be right back.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high to have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the backdoor channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover the mystery of the Kaddish. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening, a book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com.
We're back. We're talking with Assaf Heffetz, who's the former commander of the Israeli police, David Rubin, who is the former economic minister to the state of, from the state of Israel to New York, and Dov Shiloah, who is a man whose father was head of the Mossad, and probably he did something in intelligence too that he doesn't want to talk about now, but we know that he worked in intelligence units. Maybe he worked for Assaf in police, I don't know.
Pleasure.
What is, Assaf, what's the greatest threat to Israel today?
What?
The greatest threat to Israel today?
We can see it. The great threat in Israel. Okay, the greatest threat in Israel is overall war against Israel from all our neighbors.
You think that's a possibility today?
I'm not. It's not a very close threat, but we can think about it in our mind. It could happen sometimes.
David,
we have to prepare ourselves to this
absolutely.
threat.
Is the morale of Israel running low because of all these terrorism attacks?
Well, certainly the terrorism attacks are not helping the morale.
Oh, that's obvious.
But there is an interesting phenomenon also in this, and we also talk about this in the seminar that we give. You see the way the Israeli public reacts to the terror acts, and we've had a lot of them in the past 3-4 months. If it's a small, quote-unquote small terror act, you know, one person getting killed or so, it almost goes unnoticeable. I mean, the next day, everyone forgot about it. If it's a big one, and we've had, unhappily, a few of the big ones, we had 24
Dolphinarium, I was
young people killed in the Dolphinarium, which was really terrible. And so for 3 or 4 days, you know, all the television was full, the newspaper was full of stories of their lives and everything. And 5 or 6 days later, it was already in page 3 or 4, and you know, people forgot about it. They said it's fun to help the families and so on. Now, many people criticize this. You know, they think that we are callous and insensitive to what's happening, and we should pay more attention and keep. On the other hand, many people see this as a positive thing, and which I personally do, because life does have to get back to normal. If we would believe each case and keep talking about it, we wouldn't be able to survive. And what happens is that I think the Israeli frame of mind has managed to compartmentalize these incidents, and life goes on. And you know, you've been to Israel, you know that. I mean, obviously, if you live in a Western Bank you know, someplace near the West Bank. I mean, you are affected, but if you live in Tel Aviv or Haifa or even Jerusalem, you know, Beersheba, anything like that, you don't feel that there's anything going around. You open the paper, you read the news. So it really, I don't think it has a major effect, but obviously the fact that it goes on and on and on, and Yasser Arafat does not seem to understand, I think, the world attitude, and certainly the Israeli attitude to terror today, is somewhat depressing, I would say.
Dov, you're a historian by nature, and you know the history of Israel on the palm of your hand. Do you remember times as tough as this in Israel?
Well, look, in the 50s we had the great economic problems. There were times when I was a bit younger again. These were the time when we had the Fedayeen attacks attacking civilians, and there was a big argument whether or not we should hit back. There was the period, well, the very difficult period on the eve of the Six-Day War, if we remember it. The tenseness, what will happen, what won't happen. And then, of course, there was the initial stages of the Yom Kippur War. I think today we are in a very difficult situation. I'm not too sure that everything is because of the security situation. I think everyone has realized that Arafat is not a partner. And while I don't think we should do anything from our point of view to get rid of him, he will eventually disappear from the scene. What does that mean? That means that basically we postpone our real wishes for finding some kind of a solution in the foreseeable future. You asked Assaf about a war. I don't think the Arab countries around us are interested in a war. I think King Abdallah of Jordan, I mean, he couldn't care less. He wouldn't want a war. I mean, there's some statements that are made about how Israel is mistreating Arafat, etc., but I don't think it's really very deep in that sense. I think what is happening is that our problems today are the fact that the security situation, coupled with the economic difficulties, coupled with a lot of social unrest due to gaps within those they have and they have nots.
Poor and the rich?
Poor and the rich, and then I think people are also getting fed up slowly but surely with the financial allocations to non-productive elements in Israeli society. Shas giving
it's
in.
a religious party which uses a lot of funding.
Yeah.
You know, we've said this 100 times, if you want to vote on foreign policy with Shas, usually it costs you some money internally and you get the vote. And we know that that happens. Assaf, you were chief of police during the time that post-Oslo. So did you have meetings with PLO security people?
Yes, I know the most of them.
You know them?
Yeah, Jibril Rajub, Mohammed Khalan, Razi Jibali. They was my friend. I talked with them and we tried to cooperate. And what happened the last year, it's terrible for them and for us.
You felt that they were in good faith? They were really trying to cooperate?
In my time, yeah, I felt that they want to cooperate. I felt it's going to be a real cooperation. What's happened, that the street pushed the leader to this situation. They've no enough power and integrity to confront this trend. And that's what I think.
Do you think there was ever a time that Arafat was in good faith and wanted to comply with the Oslo agreements based upon your relationships with these counterparts in security who talk to you all the time? And I'm sure you guys had coffee, you buzzed about a lot of different things. Did they believe that Arafat was sincere?
I don't understand that.
Well, was Arafat sincere that he wanted a...
Did they believe?
Today, I'm not...
No, then.
Then. When you met with Rajub and all these guys, did they believe in Arafat, that he was sincere in wanting to make a...
That's what I think.
That's
what I felt from them, that they believe in this direction. And what happened, for me, it's a surprise, a big surprise. And for them, it's a tragic situation.
So what happened, David? What changed that?
It's difficult to tell, and I don't know if anyone will ever know the real story, and maybe historians, maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now. My personal feeling is, and it's just my personal feeling, I think that it was a complete miscalculation on the side of Arafat. He, up to Camp David and the meeting with, and the Barak proposals, I think that Arafat played his cards pretty well. He used force and so on, and he negotiated with him. But then when he rejected completely Barak's proposals in Camp David, I think this was the turning point. And at some stage...
But why? Why did he reject it? That's the question. If he was sincere about Oslo, in Oslo he said no more terrorism, right? No more, we believe in Israel, we love Israel, we take away the conditions for the destruction of Israel, the covenants against the destruction of Israel. I personally was in Gaza when they voted to take away this so-called covenant. Well, we may not know the answer. Maybe Dov knows.
No, I think obviously he didn't, because he thought he would get more.
Is he capable? I don't believe that either.
What I think was that came the moment of truth. And all of a sudden Arafat woke up to the fact that although he would be getting a lot, he is going to be a person who will give up certain basic demands that the Palestinians have had. If it is, although he might get much more than people expected in Jerusalem, he will be admitting something about Jerusalem. He will be sacrificing the right of return. And he couldn't, I think, face this issue, and he just ran away.
All right. Did you ever meet Arafat?
Yes. What I think that Arafat did not prepare himself and these people to this change, and to this agreement, and they are not agree.
But he had a lot of time. You never met? I met Arafat. I went to see Arafat twice on behalf of your ministers, and I can tell you my feeling about this whole situation. Arafat had to be tested in a very, very tough way. He promised me, when I went to see him, I was asked to find the MIAs, the missing in action boys, and I went to Tunis to see him at the behest of Ezer Weitzman. It's an old story. And I spent 7 hours with him, and he meets people 3 o'clock in the morning. So he has this whole way of traveling, you know the whole story. My contention on this show has been, and in my book, that yes, when Arafat decided he wanted to talk with Israel, the same day Israel should have recognized the PLO as an entity. At the same time, he should have destroyed the covenants or knocked out the covenants. Then, before you gave him land and soldiers, you should go to Geneva and talk in committees. Talk for 5 years, 6 years, 3, because there's so many complications. And I think, and I'm an American, I think one of the errors of judgment about Oslo was the fact that you went in good faith and you armed them with police and you gave them some pieces of land. And I think that this was maybe an irreversible error in the history of Israel. It's my opinion. We're 3 of us talking here, and it's a buzz. You understand my position, Assaf?
Yeah, I understand. Look,
would you agree or disagree with me?
I agree with from this point of view now.
Right.
It was a completely wrong direction to do it like this.
You agree, David, or?
Again, it's difficult to say. I think that
every question is difficult. I brought you on here to face difficulty.
Yeah,
this is not a pajama party.
Another thing is, I must tell you, I've never met Arafat, but a few months ago I spoke with a few people who were very close to him, and obviously we're talking about Arafat.
I don't disagree with you. I don't think anybody is close to Arafat and knows his.
Let's say, who know him very well, then maybe not close to him. And obviously I asked them the question, what does Arafat really want? And the answer that I got, which may explain some of the things, they said, look, the problem is that you Israelis, you keep asking yourself, what is the master plan of Arafat? What is he trying to reach? Where is his goal? You don't understand that he keeps changing his mind all the time. He does not know now where he wants to be.
All right, we're going to be running out of time. If I have to vote, I vote with Dov. Okay. I think elongation, he accepted the concept of trying to move it along. He didn't want a finality because his leadership depended on him elongating the situation. And now he found out that he could really finish it. He panicked. It's an emotional reaction, and he just dissipated, and the population went away. And in my opinion, Dov, a classical era of Israeli negotiators. Yitzhak Rabin personally, and you knew Rabin very well, and I knew him very well, was very reluctant to go into Oslo. We all know that, but many of us do. If you read the book, the Charney Report, it's all in there. Dov, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
David, pleasure always.
Thank you very much.
Assaf,
Thank you.
Pleasure to meet you. We'll see you next week. You understand now what Homeland Security is, and if I'm a mayor, I would call TICS and find out how I make my community feel safe. Probably start an intelligence unit, which, what's his name, Ray Kelly just did. In the police now we have an intelligence unit and a counterterrorism unit.
That's what President Bush recommended.
We'll see you next week.
Available now over iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play. Leon Charney's cantorial CD in Disco Lam. Listen as Charney movingly sings El Mole Rachamim and Charney's amazing rendition of a disco remix of Adon Olam, all sung in the incredible and individual Charney style. Also listen to the CDs on Rhapsody. Download Leon Charney's cantorial songs in Disco Lam, the disco remix of Adon Olam on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. Or listen in on Rhapsody. All available now.